How's that? I never use a microphone. I teach like every day. This is all brand new. So to paraphrase I'm reading off some notes, but to paraphrase my wife's pep talk last night, she was helping me through this. She offered this to me. She said, you teach art history at a community college where so many days are spent trying to convince your class to just be there and to see the importance of this work. And this audience that you're going to see is literally risking your lives to be here. So thank you. This is brand new. It's a difficult time. So a few weeks ago, I bought a cookbook from Daniel Patterson, who's the chef owner of the Michelin two-star restaurant Qua in San Francisco. And this account is a preface to one of his signature recipes. It's called Earth and Sea. It's a dish that is continually transformed during the run of their tasting menu, adjusting with the seasons, the audience, and in his own approaches. As Patterson writes, he said, the year before I opened Qua, Alexandra, his wife, and I moved to the western edge of the city, the edge of the continent. It was a place out of time, constantly shrouded in ghostly fog, with forests of giant trees bumping up against rolling grass, and moss-covered hillsides cascading down to rocky beaches. Beyond the dunes, the Pacific Ocean sprawled endlessly towards the horizon. Growing up on the East Coast, I was used to living by the shore, but this felt different. It was more untamed. It's the moment where earth meets sea, more vivid. I walked the trails along the coast frequently. I found finding herbs and flowers in forests and by the beach, and that connection to the place where I lived seeped into my cooking. So in considering how to open today, these remembrances offer what feel like the perfect counterpoint to this next part. And David Park once decried, this is a quote, "The East was never my medium. I've never had the friends, influence, position, esteem, contacts, or even love for it that I have here in California." And with this revealing remark to his brother, I get nervous. With this revealing remark to his brother, Park stakes out an operative space for his practice. He's delimiting his environment of engagement, a physical, psychic, and emotionally charged territory that he would explore from abstraction through figuration for his entire career. So for me, growing up in Ohio, followed by Florida, where I selected painting as my field of choice while I was living in Gainesville, all the while being indoctrinated by East Coast painters, I found myself, like Park, heading for California the first chance I got. I remember ditching my college graduation ceremony to start driving westward immediately, to put everything into motion, to drive off into the sunset and then watch it rise anew from the other side. California was, for Park and I both maybe, mobility, migration, fragmentation, rebellion, and newness. Without any real possibilities on the horizon, it was the only possibility. It was, perhaps, just possibility. David Park drove with us that first time. He was a spectral co-pilot with the right recipe for untested dishes that mixed abstraction and figuration. His influence over me may have been, although invisibly so at the time, ever present. There was a whole pantheon of artworks and artists that I sought to access, conjure, and commune with when I arrived in the Bay Area. David Park, Richard Diemenkorn, Elmer Bischoff, Joan Brown, Bruce Conner, Jess Collins, Wayne Thiebaud, Ant Farm, Survival Research Laboratories, the Mission School, so Barry McGee, Margaret Gagaulin, Christian Schumann, William Wiley, Primus, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, Danielle Steele, and my mom is still a huge fan to this day. And later, people like Alice Waters, Chez Panisse, and Betty's Ocean View Diner. And it took me a while to arrive at Betty's, but in some ways, I don't think I ever left service there. And I would say that fucking up my interview for a position as a breakfast line cook there may be one of my greatest failures. But looking back, I don't think he's here. I appreciate Fred's kindness during the whole fiasco, and I retroactively apologize for adding to the stress of a regular breakfast crowd's extended wait time that day. And I still model my custard-like scrambled eggs on their standard. Betty's Ocean View Diner captured a particular zeitgeist for East Bay breakfast diners and hospitality workers since their opening in 1982. Their focus on sustainably sourced food and local ingredients was prescient, and the dual restaurants that they had side by side became a haven for artists, for burned out cooks, and itinerant staff alike. Notoriously, all staff, and this included front of the house as well as the kitchen, shared tips at the end of their shift, creating a space for collective success. It was a progressive approach in 1994, and perhaps still today in some parts. My interview with Betty and her husband Manfred was the first time that anyone in any professional sense had approached me as an artist or as a painter. I remember them recommending that I take the earlier shift offering so that I would have time to work to paint by natural light. That sensitivity to the holistic role and requirements of an artistic practice drives my approaches to this day. And what holds these strands together mnemonically now is a shared sense of relating humanity, of locating something in, of, or about the body. It's alchemy, it's gastronomy, it's traveling and painting, conflating and mixing. It's this synthesis of sensations acting in concert that fuels memories of California for me. I imagine it felt similar in 1928, if not more so. So like Park, I sought a metaphysical medium, a substance capable of transmuting from paint body into locational identity, something that transports pigment and simultaneously transports us. Paint moving in vagaries, codes switching. And like that, it still feels surreal. It's California dreaming, for sure. And it's hazy for me to recall the first time I actually came across David Park's paintings. One of my Florida faculty was enamored with the whole Bay Area figurative crew, and we'd go to the library and pull catalogs and monographs on Park and Bishop and Diebenkorn, studying their tactics like CSI agents. Likely I remember one from a yellowing slideshow projected wearily in some morning class. Park's work haunted me then, and it haunts me now. And while critical assessment often charts his transformation from abstraction to figuration, I'm always left wondering how he actually envisioned those thick painted figures that inhabited his dense surfaces. Were they people covered in paint? Were they made of paint, like goopy golems perhaps? Or rather existing in a world itself, wholly constructed of paint? Do they breathe paint air? Do they wear paint clothes? Do they stand on paint grass? Do they tread on paint pavement, or rather paintment? Or were we seeing a world just like our own through thick paint-smeared filters? I remember the first time I walked out of LAX after flying to Los Angeles, and I wondered how far away the city was from the airport proper. And greater Los Angeles was really easy to spot. It existed at eye length like a miniature metropolis covered by a cloudy, greenish-brown glass dome. It's like a dystopic version of Kandor, the last Kryptonian city, forever shrunken and kept in protective custody inside Superman's Fortress of Solitude. Did David Park's paint cling to his figures like a dense fog smoke of the West, or was it dually a thick nightmare paint indictment of being stuck in the East? All I knew when I saw his images was that it seemed like his approach, at very least, offered an easier way to make it out of painting and drawing models from life. Like Park, I began to slather every surface. People became paint people, dogs paint dogs. Cities paint cities, covering the world one piece at a time. And so writing this, I just found an image of David Park's Sunbather, circa 1950 and 1953, depicting a person lying face down on a towel on the beach, shoes nearby, perilously close to the water's edge, with a subtle suggestion of soft waves lapping the shore. Thinking about this image as existing in paintland, the terror crawls to a near glacial pace. The shoes get heavier. Syrupy strokes defining and coating them. The suggestion of sand evaporates and is replaced with plump brushstrokes, building a maze of slow, muddy paths that elude a way forward. The towel is denser now, woven and embroidered with chalky paint threads. And the figure, the sunbather, is smeared and slathered with thick ointment, pressing them into a flat, horizontal beachscape, somewhere and nowhere. The title for this paper is a not oblique reference to the Jerry Reed title track for the 1977 film Smokey and the Bandit. At the heart of this whole project for me is the question of mobility through, in, and of these paintings. Park assiduously designed his practice in California for, one may suggest, Californians. They got it, right? They needed that thick painted sunscreen for protection. It was a bronze armor for new times. So I acknowledge, only with trepidation, that climate-controlled vehicles have loaded all of these up, taken to the interstate, and moved them to new, foreign, and potentially, as Park noted, hostile environments. Like Jerry Reed croons, and perhaps I'll do this as a form of reconciliation, so I'll stand back. Eastbound and down, loaded up and trucking, we gonna do what they say can't be done. We got a long way to go and a short time to get there. Traveling retrospective exhibitions like beer running from Texarkana with the bandit running interference are always time-sensitive affairs. So, does David Park issue an incontrovertible challenge to non-Californians? What possibilities can we, as artists, as critics, as viewers, have for fully engaging with it here? Are we, as Michiganders and outsiders now, predisposed to an incomplete appreciation by our very location? We, after all, have numerous Bay Areas of our own. We have Saginaw, we have Traverse, St. Martin, Whitefish, Keweenaw, among many others. Does David Park's own evasion of East Coast sensibilities, his California dream, become our shared separation? Or rather, can these aesthetic divisions potentially reconstitute only outside of California? Which is to say, he left and the East Coasters remained. The Cedar Tavern in New York, the New York School of Poetry, abstract expressionism, all of it arose out of the East Coast rapidly, aggressively, visibly, with New York as a de facto hub. Did David Park, even in the 1920s, sense these currents? Did he hear the land calling him away? First to Los Angeles in 1928, then Berkeley a year later? Did San Francisco exert a gravitational pull? Does it have an aesthetic gravity? There was certainly deep shared streams happening in New York in the 1950s. The de Koonings were building their own painted army, but Elaine's work, in contrast to David Park's, is quick sorcery. Her luminaries are cut into fast brushwork, producing movement that rivals the city's own pace. Park is building people. Paint sticks to itself to make meaning layered and manifest. His Four Men from 1958 grinds this pace of creation to nearly a halt. Back in the 90s, I'd board the BART in San Francisco from Berkeley, and I'd have 3 habitual stops in the city, in order. Number 1, city lights. I'm never really sure what I'd buy, but I thought it was a cool place to wear my pea coat, my Vask hiking boots, and bleached hair, and feel totally at home. Number 2, the knife shop in North Beach, where the Romanian who spoke no English and sharpened knives for every chef in the Bay Area on a huge stone wheel in the back sold me my first carbon steel Sabatier knife. And number 3, the San Francisco Art Institute. Looking back, the walk to the school always felt, physically and conceptually, about halfway between North Beach bohemianism and Fisherman's Wharf. I always hated the privilege and demeanor of the students, but I felt entitled to be there, just like them. So, was between us. I used to sneak in, case the studios for unattended art supplies, and then leave to enjoy some fried pastries on the wharf alone. I suppose that's still my MO and why I'm here today. It's perhaps salient to think of Park's significant developments in painting happening essentially down the street from Lawrence Ferlinghetti's City Lights bookstore. Beat poetry, self-awareness, enlightenment, alignments and trajectories crossing the country, crossing fields, and crossing North Beach. How much did they sense one another in these investigations? And I like to think that on the brink of reinventing figuration with Diebenkorn, with Bischoff, and really any of their crew that wasn't Clifford still, Kerouac's writing may have offered them a marker. He got out 2 for a while, anyway. On the road was the way out and the way in. Kerouac writes this: I woke up as the sun was reddening, and that was the one distinct time in my life, the strangest moment of all, when I didn't know who I was. I was far from home. I was haunted and tired with travel, in a cheap hotel room I hadn't never seen, hearing the hiss of steam outside and the creak of the old wood of the hotel, and footsteps upstairs and all the sad sounds. And I looked at the cracked high ceiling and really didn't know who I was for about 15 strange seconds. I wasn't scared. I was just somebody else, some stranger. And my whole life was a haunted life, the life of a ghost. I was halfway across America, at the dividing line between the east of my youth and the west of my future. And maybe that's why it happened right there and then, that strange red afternoon. So, here we are, back east with these works. Park's paintings, his thick surfaces, crusted with East Coast ennui, add weights to the same building that we're now sitting inside of. You're sitting, I'm standing. Coding on canvases now covering or concealing walls. What of that? The infrastructure for moving artworks is vast, and perhaps for the first time that I've wanted to think about it nostalgically, vital. For the uninitiated, how artworks move across the country, the logistics of climate-controlled transpo, which is borrowing terminology from Miami Vice, is at once arcane and futuristic in its machinations. The discrete couriers, the voluminous paperwork, the army of signatories, preparators, registrars, curators, shippers, craters, and the innumerable dollies, hydraulic ramps, tape measurements, pads, blankets, and ultimately acclimatization, movements, endless movements. They exist as a sublime miasma, a labyrinth formed into a complex typology of transience. Translocational exhibitions like this create a world unto themselves, and the notion that the galleries next to us can neatly fit into likely a single truck that on any given day could be traversing down US 94 in the lane next to you is and should be absolutely terrifying and sublime. The medium is the message for sure. So we needed these works to take a road trip, to lose their transplanted California roots and return for a holiday. Everyone, in their own way perhaps, dreads seeing family and going home again. But what if that's the only way that these paintings can truly fulfill their function? As the Red Hot Chili Peppers remind us, the edge of the world and all of Western civilization. The sun may rise in the east, at least it's settled in a final location. It's understood that Hollywood sells Californication. So, like an East Coast ghost who needs that final release from their earthly confines to make it to the next plane, does a warm reception of David Park's work in Michigan now afford these paintings, these coded objects, and by implication their creator, a chance to break on through? Can the experience and presence of his work here and now finally offer the friends, the influence, the esteem, and the love that Park once sought elsewhere? Is the East now his medium? Thank you. Stay healthy.